we do have this shale gas plays all over the United States. The Marcellus certainly has gotten the New York Times attention. But it's interesting to note what's been going on in the central and western U.S. for a lot longer. And there's demographic issues involved. There's how long people have been used to what's going on. This is an old technology. We've been hydraulically fracturing. I think Tom or John showed a slide earlier for over 60 years. I've used it in environmental investigations. I've used fracturing as a remediation technique for projects. This is not new. You've got people in the West, in the Dakotas, in Texas, who say, what's the problem with hydraulic fracturing? We've been doing it for so long. What's the big deal here? Compared to what's going on here. And again, you saw the technology, really, the horizontal drilling is what has got us to where we are. It's not the hydraulic fracturing. The way these formations respond to the hydraulic fracturing, I think the prior speaker mentioned, the Eagle Ford is a relatively brittle formation and has been productive for a while now in southwest Texas. There is little to no return of hydraulic fracturing fluid from Eagle Ford hydraulic fracturing operations, and it's geologic. What they can do there, what happens on it, and granted the numbers are relatively small. John mentioned, 8 to 15%, I think, over the lifetime of the well of the total amount of fluid coming back out in Marcellus, but. In other parts of the country, not only do you have different discharge requirements, but you have a different amount of fluid coming out. Here in the eastern U.S., the issue of water really isn't that big a deal in terms of is there enough water available to do the hydraulic fracturing to conduct these operations. Obviously, is there risk to water in the management, et cetera, certainly. That's different once you get into the western U.S. When you're looking at areas. I'm here from Denver. The Denver Basin and the whole Front Range area has probably been over-allocated for surface water for, 150, 200 years now. And we have tremendous declines in the groundwater table just from providing potable water. So the thought of an energy company coming in and saying they want a few billion gallons of water isn't as easy as in 2005. It was a very explicit exclusion in the Safe Drinking Water Act, saying that these fluids weren't going to be regulated unless you use diesel. But everything else was okay. Diesel was actually a relatively small proportion of the wells that were being fractured. The EPA is now looking to change that. Mid-June, they finished their stakeholder meetings. The EPA wants to make anybody who uses diesel deal with that gas well as though it were a Class 2 underground injection well. The Frack Act is still sitting there in limbo. It was introduced in 2009, I believe, and that will explicitly repeal the exemption. But again, it's just sitting there right now. So a lot's probably going to depend on what happens over the next 2 years with the elections and the administrations on what happens. Clean Water Act. We've all got sites here in the eastern U.S. industrial sites or other things where we've got NPDES permits and we're strictly regulated on what we can discharge, how and when, and what time of year. As I mentioned, west of the 98th meridian, there's an explicit exemption in the Clean Water Act that says that water's exempt for discharge if it has a use in agriculture or wildlife propagation. So. There are coal bed methane operations in the western U.S. who, for years, this issue of water management after you hydraulically fracture or produce water as part of it isn't as big an issue. But this creates a huge difference in how the public views what's going on. And since the public is pushing regulations, of course, that's the sweet spot for the upcoming primaries.